and then I said that Navy SEALs were good for two things: fucking and defending the country. And as soon as they retire, if they don't grow up, they're not good for anything. And he didn't like that at all. And meanwhile, I just thought I was being funny. I was married to an EOD, explosive ordnance disposal guy, back when September 11th happened. And our best man was a Navy SEAL who had a great sense of humor about himself, among other things. So I just assumed that, somebody like that would have a sense of humor, and that turned out to not be the case at all. He's actually a wicked misogynist, and really loved fucking with me while I was in prison.
Fuck.
Yeah, all for trespassing at my own house. That was my favorite part. I actually got arrested for going back to try to talk to my lover about his children who were being abused and neglected. And he called the police, and the police arrested me, even though my lover had the record. I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't make this shit up. It's pretty wild. And that again, that's just this past year. Meanwhile, I just thought I was gonna move to a farmhouse and have a wonderful life, and not so much. It's been really weird.
It's crazy to me that they tripped on you taking your shirt off in jail, like. Because I've seen the documentaries on, like, Lock Up about women's jails. They got girls in there smoking heroin and scissoring each other, and they're going to throw you in prison over some tits.
Right. I know. And meanwhile, and I've been saying this nonstop, that there are men. One of my favorite parts was when I was walking, because I ended up being homeless as soon as I got out of prison. I just got kicked out on the street. And ended up being homeless. I actually had to sleep outside, and a couple of times just because I got my wallet stolen, and just a whole bunch of really random shit happened, and I ended up in duress in a couple of different situations. But I do remember this one homeless woman. She saw me. I was just wearing a jacket, and I had it buttoned right at my breastbone. Nothing underneath it, just kind of looking a little LA boho. And this this homeless crack addict is walking across the street and accuses me of having no clothes on, even though I did. And then she goes and walks across the street to her fat, nasty, homeless, topless guy friend and called the police on me. So the police pull up as if I had done something wrong. Like, it was crazy. You'd think I'd shot somebody. And so when I talked to this police officer, he said that I was borderline indecent. And I was like, well, how can you call me indecent when you look at that dude who practically makes me a little sick to my stomach? But you're calling me indecent. And why is it that women are considered indecent when they take off their shirts, but men can be shirtless all the time? I don't understand that at all. I mean, I get it.
They passed a law on that? Because they were doing marches for men, the topless marches. I thought they passed a federal law that women could be topless.
I don't know. I actually don't know about the federal law, but I do know that there are lots of states where it's totally fine. And I also know that I've been. It's like they call the police will call it. They have creative names for it. Like I can't remember. That's so bad. It's along the lines of disturbing the peace type accusation that somehow I'm creating a disturbance by not wearing a shirt. And it's like, well, isn't that up to you? I mean, you can always avert your gaze, although I'm not sure why you would. But yeah,
that's crazy. I mean, I don't know. It turns me out there's like certain laws in certain states that are crazy. Like you were saying, some states you can walk around topless. Some states they call it a disturbance. Everything else. Like I was even reading an article the other day about there's states where blowjobs are illegal.
Oh yeah, that actually has been the case for a long time. I want to say that I heard about that when I was in graduate school, but yeah, that has been a thing. There are all sorts of weird laws, like the weird Puritan ass laws that we have all over the place that often don't get enforced, but it just seems like in Trump-Stiltskin's America that that kind of stuff gets abused all the time because there's still this really weird underlying misogyny that needs to keep pussy down instead of having it be the 1%.
Right. I mean, I think everyone should rock out with their pussy out.
Joe Tambien, my friend, I totally agree with you. I mean, I just think that yeah, I totally think that people should be topless. I'd like to go all Nubian on, and just have us all wearing togas and be topless and have headdresses and things like that, because I don't see why not. Except unless it's cold outside. Why can't we go back to being beautiful and sexual instead of being so oppressed and uptight?
That's real, though. And, like, as a kid, I remember I've seen people get shot in the street, but not one time did I see titties in the street. That would have been a way more positive experience.
Right? Now, I've definitely said a couple of times over the past year that I feel like pussy is the antidote for petroleum. Just because there's so much of that in the air. Like just because, I mean, everybody drives, and I know that, I drive Tambien, but I mean, what happens to the sexuality to our culture? And I do think that a lot of that, and pardon me for being so conspiracy theorist, I don't think that was the intent. But I do definitely think that if people fucked more, they'd drive less.
But at the same time, as a man, I will tell you, I've driven 3 hours in a fucking gas guzzling on an SUV just to get some pussy. So, I mean, we still have to have some.
Well, can't we have that bitch be a hybrid?
Well, yeah.
I mean, because it really doesn't matter. I mean, I'm sure you'd pedal your ass if you needed to. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, I would have stolen the kid's bike if I had to.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm talking about. And it just seems like, and I don't want to jump around too much, but I do feel like a lot of the problem with our culture in particular is that we don't have what I like to call the trifecta of Latinx culture, which is respeto, machismo, y familia. And we just aren't into our hips enough. We aren't into the sexiness that is much more indicative of Latinx culture. And honestly, much more indicative of African culture. It's just like... It just seems like that is really, really missing. And I think that cannabis is a big, huge part of that. The fact that it isn't decriminalized is disgusting to me and totally racist. And if it were, and we were all just a lot more liberated, then we wouldn't have half the problems that we do, like gunshots.
Exactly. Now,
Yeah.
You're actually running for president, or going to run for president, correct?
I would, it's funny because I would love to, because I think I do a really good job. I don't have a whole lot of momentum, and a lot of that has been because I've been arrested so many times. And I would absolutely love to run for president. And I feel like now would be a really good time to turn the tides. And I've been playing chess since I was a kid, and I feel like the best chess move is to run against Trump as a Republican woman in the primaries, as a conservative. And when I say conservative, I mean conservationist, like minimalist, as in somebody who just thinks that eating, sleeping, drinking, and fucking and having cannabis in most of our veins is a healthy way to be, and having a relatively simple life. It doesn't, and I'm not opposed to capitalism at all. But what I am opposed to is things like corporate personhood and not having a universal basic income, because I don't think that we take enough care of the people that are in our culture right now. I absolutely think that. But I also do believe in just leading a simple life.
Well, no, definitely. It sounds like you would be able to change the game on, like, redefining conservative, really.
Yeah, well, because the original conservatives were pretty much that way. And that is what that word means, is it does mean to conserve. And I went to Humboldt State for my undergrad, and there is a house on campus called CCAT, and I don't remember what CCAT stands for. I just remember that this entire house was powered by bicycle power. And so I have all sorts of, old school ideas for how we can live a sustainable life in this country and just have it be better for everyone. I'd like to see people be healthier and happier. And, if I can't say it enough, fuck more. There should absolutely be a lot more. I say that we need to get into la lengua. We need to get into having a second language, Espanol being a second language, and getting into going down on each other a lot more often. And all of those things are conservative minded, if you ask me. And, one of my big objections, honestly, to our president is that he uses his thumbs to tweet instead of to pleasure his beautiful wife.
True. So
right?
What would be one of your first orders of business as president?
That's really interesting. I have said this to a handful of people. I'd like to get rid of the White House, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I would like to get rid of the White House. And I know that that's not going to be popular for a lot of people, but I think that should be Native American land.
Okay.
I totally think that.
Now, would you have like a separate house for to replace the White House somewhere else, or?
Well, and I got this idea from so first of all, when I talk about decriminalization, Uruguay, Portugal was the first country to completely decriminalize, from what I understand, and then the second country to follow suit was Uruguay, and not the current president, but the previous president, he refused to live in the presidential house. And he just lived in his house with his wife. They still hung their laundry out on the clothesline. I mean, and I'm not saying that I would live where I live. I just feel like the White House doesn't need to be like that. I mean, from what I understand, there's all sorts of underground security shit for if anything horrible happens, which is fine. But I don't need some big, huge, ostentatious house. I just don't. And I don't think any president does, frankly. You're supposed to be a public servant, right?
Right.
Right. And I think we've forgotten that. If I were president, I would work for the people. And I believe in that strongly.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So, I mean, and the other thing that I've actually mentioned this a bunch, is that that I think that Spanish should be our first language. Every other country below us speaks Spanish except for Brazil, right?
Right. And
not to mention, I think that people are smarter if they speak more than one language. The rest of the world is like that. Now here's something that I find really, really offensive, is that we expect Spanish speakers, when they come to our country, when they come to this country, we expect them to speak English. And then we have the gall to put resorts in their country and expect them to wait on us in English.
Yeah.
Right? Now, every single time I say that to a first language speaker of Spanish, it's like their brain just all of a sudden melts down because they realize how incredibly fucked up that is and how incredibly polite they've been, right? And how horrible that really is for English speakers to be that arrogant. And here I am talking to you in English. Don't get me wrong, but I do practice my Espanol as much as I can because I feel like it's the respectful thing to do. I totally do. We have lots of really, really hardworking Latinx in this country, and they do not get the respect that they deserve at all, nor do Native Americans, and they absolutely freaking should. Nor do African Americans, obviously. And all of those things I want to change yesterday.
I can